these amazing presentations. And part of our funding is based on getting these surveys back. So we would appreciate that. So Dr. Mona Delahooke is a clinical child psychologist with a passion for supporting families and children. She's worked widely with multidisciplinary teams in the area of developmental and emotional differences for over 30 years. She's a senior faculty member of the Perfectum Foundation and is a trainer and consultant to schools, public-private agencies, and parents. Her blog and her new book, Beyond Behaviors, explores how we can use neuroscience and compassion to better understand and solve children's behavioral problems. She's a perfect fit to present to the Tourette Association of America, and that is so. Dr. Delahooke, can you please begin?
Okay. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for your introduction, and it is a joy to be with you all today. Wow, it's, so much has happened in the last year. What can I say? But one of the silver linings is that since almost everything has gotten virtual, I'm now able to talk to more people and meet more people now than ever before, because it's a lot easier than hopping on an airplane and getting somewhere and then traveling back. So I'm really excited. I was in New Zealand yesterday. So how can you do that other than through Zoom or through Facebook Live? And so I am really happy to be here and honored to be here, and just wish you all well as parents and providers during this difficult time. Here we are in the middle of COVID-19, and a whole awakening in our country to racial injustice. And then we have hurricanes, and if you're out where I am at, the whole West Coast is on fire. So it's challenging times, no doubt, and historic times. And also as parents, it wasn't easy before all this. So I am really happy to be here with you to share what I've learned over the last few decades about how can we reduce our stress for ourselves, for our children, and have it be an easier time. So if you're on, maybe mute your screen. I hear a little feedback from someone. So if you're on, to mute. There we go. And how can you hear me now? Fine, Wendy? Great. So I'm going to start by introducing this idea that behaviors and behavioral challenges are just the tip of the iceberg. So when if you think about an iceberg, only about 10% of that big chunk of ice is visible from the above the waterline. And what we see visibly for behaviors is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And what is underlying behaviors, what's causing behaviors, is way bigger than what we see. So what I'm thinking about and what I've written about is that behaviors of what we see are an adaptation to a person's nervous system, to their wiring, to their emotional regulation, and to their sensory processing. They are so many reasons and so many triggers and causes of behaviors, the myriad of triggers and causes of behaviors. And when we're thinking about having additional wiring differences like Tourette or tic or motor tics, then we also know that there are some different wiring pieces, some neurodivergent wiring happening in the brain, which also can contribute to what we see on the surface. And right now in our culture, we kind of look at behaviors as either good or bad, right? In our school districts, we see behaviors as compliant or non-compliant, as misbehavior or good behavior in quotes. Sometimes we see behaviors as testing limits or defiance. I've heard parents being blamed in IEPs, for example, that, oh, maybe the child is having inconsistent discipline at home, and maybe that's to blame. And also, I have seen my very big fair share of blame being put onto a disorder, for example, or a label, which I really like to call them labels more than disorders, but very well-meaning. And I will say right here in the beginning that educators and fellow professionals are well-meaning, no doubt. And so I'm not blaming or shaming. This is 100% of a self-compassion zone and compassion for others zone. So if anything I say today makes you feel like, uh-oh, I did something wrong, or my child's team is doing something wrong, please don't go there. Just offer yourself some compassion, because the ideas that I'm sharing with you are very new, and they haven't been integrated into the educational setting very much yet, or into our culture, because we are kind of accustomed to viewing behaviors in this way. So anyway, behaviors get a bad rap. And my idea about behaviors is that I think they are so useful because they tell us so much about the child's threat detection system. Not just the child, but our own as parents. So Wendy sent me some articles, and I just wanted to go through a few of them. I thought they were just so interesting. Recent articles. So if you look back here at the tip of the iceberg, and you see underneath, you might not be able to read it, but underneath it says physiological state or sensory motor processing, adaptations to how we understand the world basically is through our sensory systems. Our sensory systems are how we take in the world. It's our seeing, our hearing, our taste, our smell, our movement. Everything that we get from the outside world has to go through our sensors, which are on our skin, our eyes, our ears, our nose for smelling, et cetera, et cetera. So this new study showed that what I was taught years ago also about Tourette is that there's sensory overreactivity. What is that? 80%, in this study, 80% of Tourette syndrome patients reported subjectively enhanced sensory perception. So, and overreactivity. So what does overreactivity means? That those sensory perceptions, such as sound, something you may see visually, movement, maybe a sense of your tactile system, your sense of touch, may be overactive in some individuals. And what that equals to is that when you feel overreactive, I don't know if any of you have your own overreactivity. I know I do. I have a very strong overreactivity to background and foreground noises. So if I'm in like a huge party, which I haven't been, it's been a nice thing for me over the last few years. I haven't been invited to any cocktail parties, which are my nemesis, because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise in front, and there's a lot of noise in back. And when that happens, I usually get a headache or start to feel kind of anxious. So, and that's because I have sensory overreactivity in my auditory system, my sense of hearing. I had a very high fever when I was younger, and it reduced the functionality of my inner ear. So I have a functional deficit in my hearing system. So the reason I'm telling you this is that when you have a child or a teenager or an adult who is overreactive in their sensory systems, that leads to vulnerability. And that vulnerability usually comes out as a behavior. A child might be more controlling, or they may try to get out of a situation, or they may have a challenging behavior. So I thought this is a very very important finding for us to consider when we think about behavioral challenges and how to support our children. Now, going just a tad bit deeper, this was a very good article in Child Psychiatry and Human Development, and there are neural mechanisms, which just mean in the brain pathways that underlie something called emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the ability to control one's behaviors and emotions. And the area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is associated with disinhibition. In other words, when you have a very well-functioning kind of top-down brain, as Tina Bryson and Dan Siegel, some of my colleagues call it the upstairs brain. When that is really developed, then before you do or say something, like before you haul off and say a bad word or hit your sibling, your upstairs brain can say, whoa, 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 I don't think that's a good idea. I think maybe you shouldn't do that right now. Maybe say a word instead. So this is what our top-down brain does. Our circuits in our neocortex, this upper part of the brain behind the forehead, kind of calm down impulses and calm down behavioral impulses and our emotional impulses. So what this article is talking about is that there may be disinhibition, meaning that there may not be enough inhibition coming down from the upstairs brain to control both tics and emotional regulation. And this may be why some of our children have difficulty with these emotional regulation strategies that are taught. Because if there's something going on in these lower systems that are more instinctual, then there's kind of a tension on how much the child can control their emotions and therefore their behaviors. So I'm telling you this not because it is really only happening in individuals diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, but this is a very popular cause of behavioral challenges for all children and teenagers who have difficulty with executive function, forward planning, and it's regardless of age. So we have something called an expectation gap. What's an expectation gap? An expectation gap is the gap between what we are expecting, we meaning educators, parents, professionals, a gap between what we expect children to be able to do and what they can actually do given their specific brain-body connection. And so when we have children who have additional reasons underneath the tip of the iceberg, in other words, in their brain-body connection, we should, in fact, expect more behavioral challenges, not be afraid of them, but understand that the ability to control one's emotions and behaviors continues through the mid-20s in all populations. So it's a developmental process. And it's actually a neurodevelopmental process because it has to do with brain development. And so you have a toddler, a 2 to 3 year old, they're just beginning to be able to control an urge to do something wrong. That starts at 2 or 3, but it develops through the mid-20s. There are many people in adulthood who cannot control their emotions and behaviors. So we need to really have a wide understanding of how profound this ability is and how much we are over expecting, especially in the educational system. Especially when you have a lot of sensory overload, it's very hard to control your behaviors for many of our students. So now really quick, I'm just going to give you there's 3 pathways of the nervous system that we have as humans that are available to us. These are actual neural pathways, meaning that it's a connection between the brain and the body through our sensors that are the afferent sensors that take information from the outside of the world and bring it up to the brain. And then our brain tells us what to do, and then the behavior comes out of that brain telling us what to do. So the first one is called the ventral vagal zone. I just call it the green zone. Easier to remember than a fancy word, but in the green, it's kind of just right. The person is available. They are calm. They are alert. They are learning. This is when we feel really happy and good as parents, when our child is kind of relaxed. They're awake and they are feeling safe with us. They have, you can see it in the look in their eyes. There's bright, shiny eyes. The body's relaxed. There's coordinated movements. The face is happy. The voice sounds happy. You know, you can smile with your voice. You can hear somebody smiling with their tone of their voice. So all of these good things happen for parents and for kids when we're in the green zone. And this green zone, again, is a physiological state. We can't necessarily will ourselves into it, although we can, there are a lot of tools and techniques we can use to try to get here. But sometimes when a child or an adult is in a state of physiological overload, we go to the sympathetic nervous system. Oh, here's the green. Here's where we're good. We're happy. We're learning. We're calm. Our body is calm. But when we sense a threat, and a threat can be anything from the way somebody looks at us to the sounds that are in our environment or what we're in, like if we're in a moving car and we have motion sickness, or if we taste something that is really noxious, or if we are forced to go on a swing and we're actually terrified of swinging, then we go to the sympathetic nervous system, which is the red, we call the red zone. And here we have our characteristic behaviors that everybody is concerned about. The person, could have a fit or a tantrum. They may avoid eye contact. They have this characteristic body position, which is either running away or fighting. And the face will have these certain looks, the voice, et cetera, et cetera. This is a sympathetic nervous system that we get triggered onto. It's a pathway, a neural pathway that you get triggered onto. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. I'm sure you're familiar with those fast triggers that some of your children that happen. This is not based on your child choosing it. It's a default pathway when the nervous system detects threat. So it's very different than a behavior that is kind of jokingly testing limits, like a 1-year-old throwing stuff off the high chair so that they can watch it fall and watch you pick it up. This is more of a default stress behavior or stress response. So that's the red. And this is the path. Again, this is what our educators have a lot of difficulty managing these behaviors in our students. They are, our education system is pretty outdated in how, and I don't mean to say every educator out there, but I've been to hundreds of districts and spoken to thousands of educators. Are in general, our education system still understands behaviors from a behavior technology standpoint of children choosing the behavior and not having the behavior be a stress response or a biobehavioral response. And the last one is the blue pathway, and that is where students and children kind of disconnect and they kind of lose hope. And in this pathway, there's not movement, there's just a lot of settling. The child may appear depressed, they're not talking very much, they are not interacting, and they don't want to have social engagement. So we really want to be careful of noticing this pathway. Of course, all humans go through all of these pathways on a regular basis. We're not green all day long. Sometimes we're upset. Sometimes something bad suddenly happens. Sometimes we get a thought that freaks us out. The point is that we don't stay there all day, or especially in the blue depression pathway that we don't stay there for weeks or months. If you notice that, then we really want to get a consult with talk to the pediatrician or a mental health provider to make sure that you or your child are not sinking into more of a learned helplessness, essentially, where your child might look like this, where they are just slowed down, way too slow. There is a flatness, there is not energy, there's no vitality, and there is no exploration, curiosity, or engagement. So this is more rare, but we want to just be aware of these three pathways of the nervous system. And why do we want to know why? Well, over time, if a child or an adult spends too much time in the red or the blue, we have what we call an activated stress system. And that means we're under too much stress, it's chronic, the level's too high, and it's lasting too long. And it disrupts our ability to focus. So as a parent or going to work and in your work, if you're constantly exhausted, if your stress system is burned out, and honestly, so many parents who are working from home right now are feeling this way. I just have so much empathy for the load, the really unbearable load that many of us are carrying in trying to work from home, educate our kids at the same time, and stay sane and regulated. So it's a real deal. These are really hard times. Yael Schonbrun wrote this great blog post, and I just love it. She said, here's some suggestions I really love. You have fewer resources to dedicate, so dedicate them wisely. Get clear on what assignments are absolutely critical and time sensitive, which ones can be delayed. That's for yourself as well as your children. And then keep the ball rolling, but drop expectations that things are going to be moving down the lane quickly, because they're not. Many people are suffering because we are under the threat of our health and our life in the world. And then we have that added onto the normal stress that we have had before the pandemic. So what do all children need? What is the beautiful, what can I say? Like this mother's milk, essentially, for stress is mindful, caring, and centered adults. A proximity, that being close to adults who can co-regulate, meaning who can come up by you, stay by you while you're feeling horrible and upset, with positive back and forth co-regulation. Co-regulation is when you're upset and someone comes alongside you and is present and witnesses what you're going through and provides you this connection, the social connection of not necessarily solving your trouble or solving your problem, but letting you know that you're not alone. And our children really need this, at least from like one adult in their life, because it helps buffer stress. And I'd say we adults need it too. Mommies and daddies need mommy and daddy love from other adults. Sunia Luther is one of the world's most prolific resilience researchers. And I listened to a podcast she did yesterday. And it was mind-boggling when the person said, what do our children need the most? She said, what our children need the most, according to the research, is adults taking care of the mommies and the daddies. So mommies and daddies are so depleted right now that they need care. They need care from other adults, not from their children. So I would ask you, how are you taking care of yourself? How good is your self-care right now? Can you identify the peak stressors of your day? And are you able to do small things to take a break, to fill up your tank? And if you have 2 minutes to breathe with deeper exhales, or if you have a half hour to take a walk, or to do some yoga, or to have compassion for yourself. You could do compassion in less than 2 seconds. All of these things that will help regulate your threat response system as a parent is going to help you help your child, because we all need compassion and self-compassion. We all need predictable routines and rituals. And many of our predictable routines and rituals have been taken away. We can't do them right now because that's how we cope. So I'm going nuts right now because I usually walk. That's my exercise. It's my calming place of the day. But I also happen to have asthma. So the air is so bad that I cannot walk outside. It's been a week and I can feel it in my nervous system. I can feel the stress building up because my predictable routine was taken away. So we are all feeling this in some way, shape, or form about prediction. And then finally, connection with each other. So if you have parent support groups, I love that this is a national association. If you have neighbors or parent support groups or somewhere where you can just have moments of connection. A really amazing study in 2020 by Elissa Epel showed that even a 5-minute positive engagement with another adult helps you have less mind wandering and more presence and centeredness as a parent. So it's really critical to have to get our own support so that we can do things like play. Play is the antidote for stress for children, for all children, and then for all people, depending on, what your play looks like. Play for a teenager is going to look different than for a child, but play is a bridge that actually builds the neural connections to this upstairs brain, this prefrontal cortex. It gets built over the years through playful, loving interactions with our parents, our caregivers, and our teachers. So my friend Emily wrote this the other day. I love this. Don't go into the school year with 2019 goals. This is 2020. Have 2020 goals. Safety. Safety. That is essential. Connection, mental wellness, physical health, and maintaining relationships. These are the goals we need to have right now because the academic piece is recoverable, but it takes many, many more positive interactions with a child to recover from one negative interaction with a child. We all rupture with our children. It's impossible to be perfect, but positive interactions are kind of sliding off of us and negative interactions stick harder. So if we remember that the most important tool in our toolbox is human connection for ourselves, for our children, things will be less painful. And that healthy relationships aren't optional. In fact, they are really the vehicle that drives all development forward and all hope forward. I have a book called Beyond Behaviors. It explains the neuroscience and also explains how we help children to grow the ability to control their emotions and behaviors. And that's available on Amazon. And also find me on social media too. I'm on Facebook, Instagram at Mona Delahooke, Twitter, and really hope to stay connected with all of you as I post different things to different studies, helpful tips, and encouragement for parents and providers, for all of us along this difficult journey that has suddenly become more difficult in the last 6 months. So thank you. I'm excited to now just see what's in the chat, see if there are any questions, and get to know you a little better. So I think what I'll do is stop my shared screen and move on so I can see you.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Delahooke. I just tried to put, there we go. I have a survey, so while everybody is on, and I'm going to read some questions for Dr. Delahooke, if you wouldn't mind filling out our Survey Monkey as well, you can do that now or, of course, at the very end. Let's see, I have one question here. So this is a question that just came in, and then I'm going to scroll back up to the top of a few I was going to have you answer. What is your view of behavior as a communicative response and function to have a need met and or avoid something that is perceived as a threat?
Great question. So this is the way I view behaviors, especially what we would consider challenging behaviors. Let me back up. Let me say first that our traditional system is viewing behaviors as stimulus response. So kind of you encounter something that happens, and then you have a response to that. And so behavior theory and behavior management looks at the function of a behavior as to either get something, get out of something, or avoid something, right? So get something, get out of something, or avoid something. And even if it's perceived as a threat, it's still viewed as, okay, you have this behavior, and so what you do in a behavioral system is that you either consequence or reinforce what comes after so that you will reduce the incidence of those undesired behaviors. What I view, and what Dr. Stephen Porges, how he views behaviors, and Dr. Porges is a neuroscientist, probably one of the world's best known and most beloved neuroscientists, and he developed something called the Polyvagal Theory in 1994. So when I had worked with children using cognitive behavioral theory for many years, and when I read his work and integrated it into behavior theory, I found out some stuff that made everything made more sense to me. And that is that in between a stimulus and a response, you have the child's nervous system. So what Dr. Porges introduced us to is this idea of something called neuroception. It's the subconscious perception of threat or safety, which happens all the time. And in seriously challenging behaviors, what is happening is a subconscious trigger into threat, which makes that red pathway, the sympathetic nervous system, automatically engage, which launches the fight or flight behaviors. This is much different than viewing a challenging behavior as a child throwing a tantrum in order to not go to their next class. So I do not view behaviors as a way to manipulate adults or to get out of something. I view behaviors as a very strong, powerful communication about a child's threat detection system. And so it's a whole new way of viewing behaviors. And if your head's kind of turning on its axis, I understand. It's a different way of viewing behaviors, but I can tell you that it's catching on very fast with parents because and in my own practice over the last 30 years, once we viewed behaviors in this way in our IEP teams, we saw children's challenging behaviors fall away because the reasons for them were gone. The threat was gone. I hope that makes sense. It's a short answer to a complicated and a really good question.
Thank you, Dr. Delahooke. Here's another question. Everything that Dr. Delahooke says is spot on, but how do we convey this to people who think the child is in control and think that they are choosing these behaviors?
Mm. That is, hey, if anyone can help me answer that, I will give you the Prize of the Year award. I think that what we do is, just as relationships get us through difficult times, we use our relationships to help educate our providers, our teachers about this new way of thinking. It's why I wrote Beyond Behaviors, because I wanted a neurodevelopmental neuroscience foundation so that educators and others wouldn't think that this is a threat, like, oh, this is a fancy, fun idea or a fluffy idea. This is really hard neuroscience. So I guess what I would say to that is, don't blame or shame providers, but let them know there's another perspective around. And if it's helpful to you to go to my blog, I have free blog posts on so many topics that share with you how I've engaged others, including the teams I work with, in a very collegial way to join hands in understanding that maybe our approach to children is too harsh, because we're thinking that they're purposefully misbehaving when they're not, when they're actually trying so hard. As my colleague and friend Ross Green says, children do well if they can. I believe this with my whole heart. They want to please us. They want to please their teachers. But our neurodivergent children need our help. They need us to help them see that we're on their side and we're not asking them to do stuff that isn't in their current toolbox in their brain and body.
Thank you for that. And I will give a lot of credit to your blog post, Dr. Delahooke, that they're very quick reads and they are excellent. So, and they're also addicting. So even though they're quick reads,
that's why I made them quick. Who has time, right? Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
So here's another question from Laura. She says, I see the importance of connecting with and being accepting of my children's behavior. But what do I do? How should I handle my son hitting his brother because he took his socks off and he hates feet? What do I do when my child is too anxious to get into his online class and he's already skipped 2 days in the last week?
Absolutely. So it's a combination of what we have to do as parents, and that is, it's not okay. Well, in my book, if you agree, generally it's not okay to hit my sibling or to let go of your family values or what behaviors are, what the rules are in your family, right? So you can hold on to what your parenting limits are and set those limits, but set them with empathy at the same time. So something like, I know that, did you say the socks coming off? He didn't like to see feet. So there we have either a visual trigger or an olfactory trigger, like it smells or whatever the feet is. It's an actual thing. So the empathy piece would be, oh my goodness, there are those feet again, honey. I know this is so hard for you. But how can I help you? You know it's not okay to hit your brother. Let's see how we can figure this out. And the way we figure it out is through each child's nervous system. And I can't, since I don't know your son or your family, I of course can't answer questions specifically. But what I can say is that what we do to help individual children is that we use their sensory motor system to their advantage. So we take two steps. We take away the cues of threat when we can. So compassionately, if it's possible, to warn the child when the socks are coming off of daddy's feet, or we take away the threat as much as practical with compassion, but then we add in cues of safety to deflect the cues of threat. And if that sounds complicated, you know, I explain it in my book, but it's a little complicated because each and every child is different. It's going to be different for your child than it is for any other child in the planet. So when I was just, you know, when I think back on one of my own children, the taking the cues of threat had to do with like giving her, well, here's an example. Like if a child has auditory sensitivity, then you compassionately figure out a way to have noise canceling headphones for a while. And then, so that's taking away a cue. But then what you add for the safety is, hey buddy, can I sit with you right now? It looks like you're kind of stressed out. Just, can we hang together? Want to take a walk together? I'm with you. You're not alone. This is real. I think we really need to give our kids a sense of this is real and this is so tough. So how about that, you know, when you're having a emotional regulation trigger that also triggers a tic, right? So it's kind of a cascade. The neuroscience is that there are these, you know, the electricity. So you might have a child increase in their ticking, and then you've got the emotional regulation at the same time. So I say so much compassion for yourself as a parent, compassion for the child, and never lose hope. Sensory processing and integration is an interesting field. It's a young field, and the research is ongoing, and it's amazing. Look up the Star Center for Sensory Processing Disorder, the Star Center for SPD. It's a beautiful website. It's one of the world's most well-known sensory processing places. It's owned by or founded by Dr. Lucy Jane Miller, who's written several books and has done a lot of research. They have free content for parents. And so remember that if your child is having increased symptoms that are coming through the sensory system, there are things you can do. There's hope. I want you to know as a parent that there's hope, even though it feels like there isn't. And I want the child to know that, hey buddy, don't blame yourself. This is rough. This is tough. I'm here with you. We'll figure this out together. Something simple like chewing, breathing, the sound of someone else swallowing. Like swallowing tea or water really fast can throw someone into a stress response. So just know it's a real deal, but there are ways to calm the stress response. And it starts with compassion and co-regulation. I could probably talk about that a little more, but co-regulation is when you as a parent show that you're not afraid that the child is freaking out. You're just like, okay, here it is again. Uh-oh, what can I do to help you? I wanted to just briefly, I'm reading too, Wendy, up here it says, if it's okay, I'll just read this one really quick. Do you associate the 3 pathways with the zones of regulation program that is often used in the school systems? Absolutely not. 100% no. This is a different thing. So the categories I use were developed in 2009 by Dr. Connie Lillis, and they are the way for the adults to understand the nervous system of themselves and of the child. The Zones of Regulation program is a cognitive learning technique that was developed by an OT and a educator. I believe I've met them. They're wonderful people, but they agree. It is a cognitive behavioral technique and system that I believe, unfortunately now, has been very misused by educators because they're using it as almost a step-down system. Are you green? Are you yellow? Are you going towards the red? And that makes many children feel worse. So I don't recommend the zones of regulation as a teaching tool, especially for our neurodivergent children. I think I have seen in my own practice that it makes kids more stressed? So thanks for asking that question. I respectfully see a place for it, but I share the concerns of many other individuals who have seen these zones of regulation used as a teaching tool and contributing to the expectation gap because kids aren't ready to learn yet. Their brain's not ready to inhibit yet.
Okay, great. Do you want me to read off one more question, Dr. Delahooke?
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay. I know there was one up here that I saw. Just have to go back to it. What is your suggestion when both parent and child are neurodiverse and have a challenge pulling back to green in a heightened emotional situation?
Just breathtaking. You know, I can I say that I put myself in that category. So it almost caught me, that almost took my breath away, because I consider myself neurodiverse in how I process sounds in the world. I have a very small window that once I get triggered by certain sounds, I lose my own regulation. So I can really relate to that question. And I say, number one, self-compassion. We have to have a compassionate understanding of, first of all, when it happens, so that we know what to do when it happens, and that is observe ourselves. Observe it. Just observe it. When you get triggered into red or blue, just call it to yourself silently, red or blue. And then what you might do is have a toolkit. You have a toolkit, and every one of us will have a different one. I call out the ones I think are the best, you know, at the easiest in my writings. And I think that the exhale, slow breathing, actually helps the parasympathetic, the green pathway, come online. So I do think, but it doesn't work for everybody. So slow breathing, but it has to be what works for you. It could be walking. It could be taking a drink of water. It could be looking at your partner and saying, having a hand signal that says, I've been triggered, so that you can get yourself back to green. That's the key, is to get back to green without judging ourselves, beating ourselves up, and hopefully taking it out on our kids very often. But if you do take it out on your kids, welcome to the world of parenting. There's always repair. So come on. I mean, it's like we are going to bleed out of our, you know, out of our zones of our nervous system. It's what happens. We're human. We're not robots. So that's okay too. Remember that the repair is super important. And if we lose it and we can come back to our child and say, you know what, I had something happen. And I suddenly felt kind of, wow, out of control. And I'm sorry I said that to you. That's so powerful for our kids. It's such good modeling. Thank you for that question. That was really touching.
Thank you so much. It looks like our time is about up, and we've answered most of the questions. We did save the rest of the questions, so hopefully we'll be able to get back to a few people who still had questions and joined us. This has been absolutely fantastic, and I think really necessary for our Tourette syndrome community. We really appreciate you, Dr. Delahooke, doing this, and I have a comment here, phenomenal presentation. I mean, I'm sure that other people agree. So thank you so much for taking your time and being on with us tonight.
Thank you so much. It's really been such a pleasure to be here, and really a joy. And I hope that, again, that keep in mind, keep in context what I said is that these ideas are new, and they are in some circles, maybe a little controversial. So just be really kind to yourself, and let me know how you're doing. And thank you again so much for inviting me on. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Delahooke, and thank you everyone for being on. Take care now. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.